People first began coming to Queen Anne in 1851. However, the first settlers were not the first people in the Puget Sound, Queen Anne neighborhood. The Duwamish, Shilshole, and Squamish Native American tribes were first to the Queen Anne neighborhood. Queen Anne was actually named after the type of architecture that was brought there from England. This type of architecture was popular in the 1880s. It looks Victorian, elegant, it's multicolored paint, brick, and wood. In 1889, the transportation was limited to Queen Anne due to the Seattle fire. As a result, many people didn't want to live in Queen Anne, so the actual population of Queen Anne was very low in the late 1800s. However, as Queen Anne became more popular and the transportation issues were resolved, Queen Anne actually became very active in politics and continued to be active in politics into the 21st century. For example, the United South Slope residents, USSR, protested against realtor development in the neighborhood to keep its original architecture and development. Today, Queen Anne is known for its unique architecture, its activity in politics, and its proximity to the downtown area, while also being a nice suburban town.
Queen Anne is a largely residential community, rising 456 feet above the Puget Sound. Named after a style of architecture popular in the 80s, the hill's steep slopes made it one of the last neighborhoods in Seattle to be completely developed. My topic was health and mental health. This was an asset to the neighborhood. There were several small clinics, gyms, etc. As for mental health, Queen Anne has several different therapy and counseling offices. In addition to the vast mental health resources, Queen Anne also has a very positive atmosphere. It's home to many families, and there's even a small book exchange close to one of the parks. This enhances the sense of community. The neighborhood was nicer than expected, but it generally matched the data I found. I was surprised by the amount of children in the neighborhood. I didn't expect a Seattle neighborhood to have as many kids running around. Overall, Queen Anne is a great neighborhood with exceptional health and mental health services.
Hi, my name is Jake, and my individual topic was parks and green spaces within the area of Queen Anne, both of which are significant assets to a good neighborhood if incorporated correctly. Parks promote both mental and physical health and provide the community with an ability to partake in recreational activities. In addition, parks can also increase property values and attract home buyers and workers to an area. While doing research on the Queen Anne area, I discovered that it is home to one of the most well-known parks in Seattle, Cary Park. Cary Park overlooks downtown Seattle, including the Space Needle and the Sound. Occasionally, even Mount Rainier can be seen from the park, attracting many photographers and people in general. When we were first dropped off, I noticed that there were multiple parks within less than a mile, showing that access to recreation and parks is relatively easy. In addition, green spaces on most residential streets separated houses from the road, and the parks that we visited were quite large, offering a playground, swings, and even several fields for sports. However, parks were very separated from other recreational activities, such as restaurants and shopping. And most of the parks were outside of the main part of the neighborhood, and all the shops and stores were in the center of the neighborhood, and parks, while plentiful, did not have as many people. In conclusion, the parks and green spaces are a significant asset to the neighborhood of Queen Anne, offering people a place to participate in recreational activities and improving physical and mental health.
My name is Spencer Tropp, and my population health topic is transportation in Queen Anne. Researching the subject, I found there are only 3 bus routes that go through Queen Anne according to the King County Metro. There are high amounts of personal vehicles in Queen Anne when compared to the rest of Seattle. Not very many people take public transportation or use small modes of transportation like bicycles or skateboards. My team took a trip to Queen Anne to see how our research reflects the real world. I found Queen Anne is on a very large hill, and most of the streets in the area are heavily sloped. Most of the streets in the area are in disrepair and have lots of potholes and cracks. In the visit, I also noticed that we were totally void of electric rentable scooters and bicycles like what plagues the rest of Seattle. In lieu, they were rentable cars from the Lime Company. I only saw 1 bus stop the entire time we explored the area. Even if people of the area wanted to take public transport, it would have been very hard for them to find the stations. Another service I noticed was that most food establishments deliver to local residents. The The one thing that stuck out most about Queen Anne was the incredibly narrow streets in the residential areas. The streets were packed with parked cars on both sides, leaving room for only one car to drive down the road at a time. Queen Anne had inherent issues with the transportation system. There was limited access to public transportation, the skinny streets made driving a hassle, the cracks in the streets were hazardous, and the hills made biking nearly impossible. There were some good aspects of the area nonetheless. Everything was in close proximity, the freeway was very close, and there were many rentable car and taxi services in the area. Doing some follow-up research to understand the lack of rentable scooters and bikes, it turns out that in sections of Seattle, according to Uber, have banned the use of these electric vehicles based on their danger to the people, and the city considers them an eyesore. In conclusion, Queen Anne has its ups and downs. The transportation system currently works well, but time will tell how neighborhoods adapt to the ever-increasing demand to reform transportation.
When we first started driving into Queen Anne, I noticed that there was a lack of apartment buildings, a lack of condos. It was extremely suburban, and there were very nice cars. When my group and I started walking in the main Queen Anne area with the restaurants and the different spas and banks, I noticed that there was no litter and the sidewalks and the streets were very well kept. It didn't look like there was any trash or any debris that was just thrown onto the sidewalk, and I could tell that there has been people picking up the trash, or there was some sort of system for keeping it really clean. There were lots of families with children and people walking dogs. One thing that I really noticed in comparison with a lot of the Seattle neighborhoods was there was no signs of homelessness, or I didn't see any homeless people in that area. So I didn't see tents or any indication that people may be living outside. So I knew from the beginning that this may be a wealthier neighborhood. My observations did match up with what I had read. According to the Seattle Times, $1 million homes are becoming the new normal in Queen Anne. So what I saw were a lot of really suburban houses, a lack of affordable housing in terms of condos and apartments. So what I read online about $1 million homes becoming more normal, I definitely saw that when I was in Queen Anne. Additionally, I read on the Seattle Census Reporter that the average cost of a home in Queen Anne is $831,000. That is almost triple the U.S. average of a house, so I definitely knew that we were in a more wealthy area based on what I observed, and also since it aligned with what I had read on the Census Reporter and the Seattle Times. What surprised me about Queen Anne was the number of very expensive cars that I saw. However, the roads were very unkept, so I felt like the roads and the condition of the roads didn't really align with what I had read online of it being a very expensive neighborhood, very high average cost of a house, yet the roads were very unkept. In terms of affordable housing being an asset or a barrier in the Queen Anne area, I believe that the affordable housing is a barrier in Queen Anne because there is a lack thereof. The houses I observed were very, very suburban. They looked like they were very old. They were small homes, yet I saw that they were very, very, very expensive. Because there is a lack of affordable housing in Queen Anne, this creates a lack of socioeconomic diversity within the community. In terms of how the Queen Anne community is responding, I saw that there were actually more modern homes being built, in which case the community is becoming more and more unaffordable as they continue to build more housing that looks more expensive and costs more than the normal homes do, even with the normal houses being expensive as well.